controller measures. So controls are administered in two main areas. Number one, we have what we call the general controls, general IT controls, general IT controls, general IT controls, general IT controls. Then the second one took on what we call the application controls, application controls, application controls, application controls, application controls. Then we can start with this first one, what we call the general controls, the general controls, the general controls. So general controls are also divided into three areas. General controls are divided into three areas. What we call the general controls are divided into three areas. So this includes, though you have them, but we just want to have a summary. So this includes one area of that control. It will be access controls, access controls, access controls, access control. So this one protects the access of the computer system or the computer resources. Then number two, we have the system development controls, system development controls, system development controls, system development controls. Then the last one, organizational controls, organizational controls, organizational controls, organizational controls, organizational controls, organizational controls. So class, whenever we talk about general controls, what does it mean? Assuming kwamba this is the data processing environment, assuming that these are data processing environment, this is the data processing environment, or the computer room, this is a computer room, this is a computer room. So this environment needs to be protected. This environment needs to be protected by having the control measures being put in place, having control measures to be put in place. So these access controls, they're divided into two. We have what we call the physical controls, the physical controls, the physical controls, the physical controls. They also have what we call the logical controls, the logical controls, the logical controls. So let's assume kwamba before somebody gain access for this environment or this computer room, there must be measures put in place to ensure kwamba the only persons who access this computer room or this data environment where the computer facilities are or the information of system it is, there must be given what? Some permission. They should have the access rights. They should have access rights. So what could be some of the physical controls? One, you can't be using what you call the biometric doors, biometric doors for the authentication purposes. You can only be authorized, the system can only allows you, if you've been unauthorized, to enter that particular room. The other one, we can also have what we call the security guards, use of the security guards to monitor in and out, monitor the movements of in and out of this environment. The other one, we can also have what we call the CCTV cameras, the CCTV cameras being put in place, the CCTV cameras being put in place to monitor whatever people who are coming in and also going out. Or somebody can come in and leaves with a computer component like a hardware, a printer or a server or just a personal computer. And let's assume somebody has also accessed the system. Here, this now where the computer are, this is where the computer are, and somebody has gained that access. He has now gained access to that computer. There must also be measures put in place here to protect this computer, to protect this device. Like one, we shall ensure this person can only log into the system if they have a password. They can only log into the system if they have what a password, and also maybe the username. They can only log into the system if they have got a password and the username. Then you also have data being stored somewhere. You have data being stored somewhere here. So you want also to protect this data. Utapata kwamba if it is a drive, it should be under key and what? Key and lock. It should be under key and lock. So whenever we mention general controls, These are controls which are meant to protect the overall data processing environment or a computer information system or an information system. The general controls are those measures which are meant to protect the overall data processing environment or the computer room or maybe an information system. They are divided into these particular areas. Access controls, which I've at least mentioned, they could be physical controls, then the logical controls. So maybe just to summarize on these access controls, Kwanza, what could be some of the examples for the purposes of you to have notes on the access controls? So access controls. So these are controls to protect now one from accessing the system, which is in two areas: the physical controls. So class, what could be some of the examples of the physical controls? What could be some of the examples of the physical controls? One, we can use what you call use of biometric measures, use of biometric measures. The other one is a use of a security guard, use of a security guards. The other one is use of maybe metallic doors, use of metallica doors. The other one, we can also ensure adequate ventilation of the computer room, adequate ventilation of the computer room, adequate ventilation of the computer room. The other one is data recovery procedures, having data backup or the data backup, recovery procedures. So these are some of the examples of the physical controls. Then number two, on the logical controls, which could be some of the examples, the logical controls, which are basically the access measures now, on some of the procedures that takes place for the system, like use of passwords, and username, use of password and username. The other one, we could be using what we call use of firewall. Firewall is a very important device. It consists of a set of hardware and software. And the use of a firewall is to protect against the intrusion of any network. It protects against the intrusion of any network. Let's assume kwamba these are computer network. These are local area network. This local area network, it only connects computers within a premises or just a building. Then these computers want to communicate or to exchange with other computers outside there, to maybe other organizations and the rest of the world. So there will be another bigger network up, the wide area network. So there is a point of a connection between these two networks, connecting a LAN and maybe a WAN. So in between here, there will be a device, and the work of that device is to monitor the packets of data that's coming in and also going outside that network to ensure that whatever is coming in has been authorized to access that particular network. For security purposes of a given network, to monitor any possible intrusion, we need to use what we call the firewall. The other one is what we call the data encryption. So it is always very dangerous to store your data in a plain text. Normally dangerous to store your data in a plain text. So this data needs to be converted into some security codes, so that at the point of the transmission, it is secure. even if it has been intercepted by somebody along the way, that person cannot access and read the contents, cannot access and read the content. So there must be also the data encryption during the data transmission. Some of the security measures just put in place to ensure there is integrity on the data. The other one is the approval of changes, 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 approval of changes. So before somebody does any modification on the computer program, maybe an ICT personnel come and does some changes on the program used by the client in processing their transactions, there must be some proper authorization and approval before such kind of a program has been changed. So these are some of the measures that we put in place with regard to the access controls. Access controls. Yes, Steve, I may add a CCTV camera. CCTV cameras, yes, CCTV cameras, that's also a good point. CCTV cameras, the CCTV cameras. You can also have a CCTV cameras to monitor the people who coming in and also out. Kuna also other measures, like one, you can also ensure the computer room is in the upper or the raised part of the building. And that is now to mitigate on the flooding of the area. Because if the room is flooded, then the computer system can be damaged or the computer resources can be damaged. So there must be proper measure to ensure the computer room or where that data processing activities take place must be in a raised part of the building. So let's go to the number 2 of general controls with the system development controls. System development controls. The system development controls. So system development controls. System development controls. System development controls. So class, we have a system development controls as part of our general controls. Okay. Yes, Cleophas is saying that use of a spyware is a use of spyware. Yes, you can also use a spyware. You can also use a spyware as one of the control measures. A spyware is now a program just to monitor the system. Now, the spyware, it can be a good program, depending on how the organization uses it. And it can also be a bad program, depending on also how the organization uses it. For example, if it is used to monitor the computer users on whatever activities or whatever work they are doing with the computer system, if they are actually doing what they're supposed to be doing, the company, doing the company's or the organization work at that given time, they're using that computer to do the right things. In that case, it becomes what? A good software. It becomes a good software. But whenever it's now used to monitor someone's privacy without them knowing that they're being monitored, or maybe to use it to steal an organization data or information, then that case becomes what? A bad software. So spyware can also be used some of the security measure. That is, you're right. So the system development control. So systems are normally developed. Systems are normally developed, and they go through a number of activities, some interrelated activities, which we refer to as the system development life cycle, the SDLC, the system development life cycle, the system development life cycle. A number of stages which forms the interrelated activities which goes into developing and delivering an information system, a computer system, or a program for the company. So you work as an auditor, you should be in a position to understand what are these particular stages of a system development process, the system development process that every system developer will always look into. Then as an organization developer a system, there are a number of people who are normally engaged to participate in this particular process. Like one, we have the system users. The system users must be engaged into the process of a system development. There is also the managers also coming in just to ensure that everything goes as per their objectives or maybe their plan. You also have what you call the steering committee. The steering committee, the people who are now working on the ground to oversee the system development process. You also have other experts like the system analyst, who also plays a very important role during the system development process. But every stages of a system development, there is something that needs to be achieved. Your work as an auditor, you should be confirming did they able to achieve some of those particular objectives on those applied stages in the system development. While the controls put there are appropriate, they also may be adequate in mitigating the information system risk that can be affecting that system in our future. So I want us to take you through what we call the system development life cycle. So stage number one, every system starts with what we call the problem identification, problem identification, or definition, problem identification or definition, problem identification or definition. Yes, let's say we have a system which is a manual. We have a system which is a manual. Then you want to move on to automatic system, automatic system. So there is some challenges of working with this manual system, which is now making us to have a need of developing or to acquire an automatic system, to develop or to acquire an automatic system. For example, one, it could be the cost. The cost of using a manual system is very expensive, for example, in terms of the paperwork. So there is a need for us to develop a newer system, newer automatic system. The other one, it could be due to the speed. The manual system is very slow. So there is a need for us to embrace an automated system. The other one, it could be the quality of work. This system is very poor. It gives us a very poor result. So we want to see improvement on our quality. The other one, it could be maybe just the business efficiency. We want to have some efficiencies in the performance of activities. And that's why you want to embrace a newer system. The other one is about maybe obsolete. The new system, in terms of its technological aspect, it has been rendered obsolete. So we want to go and acquire an automatic system. So we already these ones up, and now the problems. We must do a proper definition to understand these particular problems. So on this particular stage, the auditor will always focus on what we call the objectives. The objective, to see whether they identified the objectives to be achieved. Did they identify the objectives to be achieved? There is a criteria used by the auditor in verifying whether the entity was able to have a good objective, what we call the SMART criteria. The SMART criteria. That means that objective needs not to be general. It has to be specified. It must be specific. You don't have a general approach in setting an objective. Upper standard commit must be measurable, something that you can quantify in money value. Then A is achievable or attainable. Something that can be achieved or it can be attained. Then R, being realistic. We have to be realistic within the context of our resources capability, within the context of what we want that particular system to do for us. Then T, we must have time frame or the time plan. We must ask ourselves when do we want this objective to be achieved. The second stage after doing that one, there is what we call the number 2, feasibility study. The feasibility study. So feasibility study class basically now to go into a journey of gathering facts, that will be used to justify or to give a case why the proposed system ought to be developed, So here you are asking yourself, is the new system economically viable? Is it worthwhile to develop that newer system? There are various types of feasibility studies here that questions needs to be answered. Types of feasibility studies. For example, one, you have what you call economic feasibility. Economic feasibility. Economic feasibility. So we ask ourselves, yes, will we be able to achieve more benefits than the cost? Will we be able to achieve more benefits than the cost if the new system happens to be developed? The other one is what we call the technical feasibility. Technical feasibility. So technical feasibility will be focusing on maybe hardware. Are we able to afford the hardware? Are we also able to afford the software? Are we also able to maybe do the user training, etc.? This question needs also to be answered to see whether we'll be in a state to acquire the hardware, the software, and also being able to train the users to understand how the system operates. The number three, we can do what you call a social feasibility. So an information system or just any system normally interacts with a certain environment, So we also have to find out, will that system be accommodative? Will it be accommodative in that environment which is going to be installed? The number four, we have to consider what we call the legal feasibility. The legal feasibility in the sense that will you be able to comply? Will you be able to comply with the various laws and regulations required? Will you be able to comply with the various laws and regulations required? For example, if the system needs to be registered, to be insured, will you be in a position to have that system to be insured? Those questions need to be answered at the point of undertaking that feasibility study. Number five is maybe the operational feasibility. Whenever we put the system into work or into operation, there's a possibility to be met by the resistance of the employee, because people by their nature will always resist change as much as they can. So we must ask ourselves, what measures are we going to put in place to ensure that when this system has been implemented, it shall not be met with the resistance among the employees. Then you go to the stage number three. After conducting feasibility study class. So your work as an auditor, the things that you need to check, because once these people have done that fact-finding mission, they have come the facts, which is documented in a form of a report, entitled the feasibility report. So your work as an auditor, you need to check whether that feasibility report is reasonable, it's accurate, and also complete. You need to check whether the report is reasonable, it is accurate, and also complete. The same peer, you need also to determine whether all the cost, justification, and benefits are verifiable. Yes, they've talked about cost, they've talked about benefits. Are they well explained? Can you verify that they actually are factual? Then the next stage, after you're done what you call this feasibility study, you go to the stage number three. So stage number three is what we call the system analysis stage. System analysis stage. So this stage is where the user requirements are normally understood. So you identify what does users want? What do they want this system to do for them? What are the business needs to be achieved? What are the system specifications that needs to be met during the system development? That normally happens on this particular stage of the system analysis. So basically establishing or determining the user's requirements. Establishing or determining the user's requirement at this particular stage. So your work as an auditor, you need to review maybe something like documentation. Do you have an adequate documentation of those users' requirements? Did the system developers team able to have a proper documentation of the user's requirements. You should be able to look at that one. And in case maybe they are asking some questions to the users, kuna some interview or they use some questionnaires to be able to understand what are the users' requirements. You need to verify whether that questionnaire actually meets the standards, actually meets the standards. Then you have number four stage, what you call the system design. The system design stage. The system design stage. The system design stage. So this is where we come up with the blueprint of the system to be implemented. We come up with the blueprint. We come up with the blueprint. With the blueprint of the system to be developed, of the system to be developed. So this one is just a documentation on maybe how the system will look like, how the system will be functioning. On this particular stage, there are normally two forms of the design taken into consideration. There is what we call the physical design. The physical design. So the physical design give a description on how the system will physically look, maybe the structure. How will be the structure of that particular system look like? How will be the structure of that particular system look like? What will be some of the physical components used in that particular system? Like we can say, this one, it can be a design. That system, it will be a circular. The other one is, of course, something like that. The design of that system will be something like a star. It will be kind of a star configuration. So this one must be also captured at the designer stage. The other one is what we call the logical design. The logical design gives an answer to maybe what are the data files of that system? How will the data files of that system look like? The other one, it could be how will the system be processing? How will the system be processing the input into output? So basically, these are some of the procedures on how that system is going to operate, how it's going to operate. So what will be the auditor's work or the auditor's procedures at this place? One auditor will be so much focused on the review of the input, processing, and output procedures. To review the input, processing, and output procedures, the auditor will be focusing on that part. The other one, the auditor will also be interviewing the system users, if they understand the design of the system. Interviewing the system users if they do understand the design of the system. Then you go to number five stage, what you call the system implementation. System implementation. So this is now where we actualize the system, where you now put the system into operation, And class, as we put the system into operation, there are certain activities which are normally considered. The number of activities which are normally considered at this particular stage of the system implementation. One, there is what you call you have to consider about the hardware and software acquisition. The hardware and the software acquisitions. The hardware and the software acquisitions. There are factors that you have to the firm will have to consider whenever they want to acquire the hardware and also the software properties to be used in the system. When we are giving also the tender or the supplier to provide you with the software or somebody to develop the software, there must be competitive tendering procedures duly followed. And you must also ensure that you acquire the hardware from a reputable vendor. Somebody ambaye akona very good reputation in the market place, to minimize the risk that whereby you ended up buying the wrong hardware and maybe acquiring a bad software. The number two, once you've done that one, there is what you call the system testing, not the system testing, but what you call the programming activities. Here is also we called the system, because the system will be using software applications. And those software application has to be written, it has to be coded. The number 3 is what you call the system testing. System testing. So system testing, we're testing now the program to see that this program is free from any error. The program is free from any error. Normally, the program code is referred to as a bug. The program code is normally referred to as the program code error is known as a bug. So this is the process whereby we'll be able to identify the bug and eliminate that particular bug by doing what you call the debugging procedure, just to ensure that the system program has got no any error. It's able to operate as intended. The next activity is what we call the system conversion. The system conversion. So the system conversion, we're now converting that system. We're now moving from the old to the new. This process normally referred to as going young. Going young. We are moving from an older system to a newer system. There are a number of strategies, 4 strategies which are usually used in that stage. There are normally 4 strategies which are used at the system conversion stage. 1, there is what we call the direct changeover. Number 2, we have what we call the parallel changeover. Next, we have what we call pilot changeover. The pilot changeover. The number 4, we have what we call the phased changeover. So these strategies, only one can be used at a time. At easy to maybe a combination of 2 at any given time. When we're moving from that old to the new, or from the current system going to the proposed system. So direct inamaanisha kwamba if we're planning kwamba tomorrow you're going to start using that newer system, then the older system automatically ceases being used. Kuna places where this one can be practicable or it can be ideal when you have to go to the director a changeover. For example, if the system is small, we can opt for what? Direct changeover. Another one, if the staffs are well trained, they understand that new system on how it works, on how it's going to operate, then you can opt to go for the direct what? A changeover. The other one, if the 2 systems are totally different, they're totally different on how they functions, the new and the old, then the direct changeover strategy may apply. The danger is that in case that new system fails, then the company activities will be disrupted. Then you have the parallel. Parallel is where now the 2 systems are running at the same time. You have the old and the new. The reasons why you have the 2 systems running at the same time is that the staff will have ample time to be able to understand that new system. Alafu also, the older system normally acts as a backup to the new system. The older system will be acting as a backup for the new system. So in case the new system fails, we can automatically switch back or revert back to the older system and ensure that the activities of the organizations are not interrupted. Then you have a pilot. So pilot is whereby we do it in experimental basis. 1, we select which areas, which sections, or which departments do you want to see that new system becomes what? Operational. For example, you have selected you want to put it for finance department kwanza. If it becomes fast success for the finance department, thereafter you can now move to production department, you go to HR department until such a time that we have got a fully implementation of that newer system. Yes, you can recall when this issue of banking, queuing for bank, where customers used to queue and a line waiting to be served by the teller. When they introduced this idea of picking the token as you wait for to be called, to be attended to, That exercise was implemented on a pilot basis. There were some selected branches which was as a pilot. They tested it, work experiment with the branches. When it became successful, it's something, it was a good idea, it can be replicated into other areas. Nowadays, almost every branch, customers are being served by what? Through the token. Then you have what you call the phase changeover. So phase changeover, you go into stages. You go into stages. Systems in what you call the modules. Every system has the modules. So these modules are implemented in phases. We can have a finance module. We can also have HR module. We can also have maybe ICT module. We can also have maybe procurement module. So instead of now going for full implementation, we can do the phases. We start with the finance, tunatoka kwa finance, we go to the HR bit of it, we go to ICT procurement, until such a time that we have got a new system fully installed into the company. So after the system conversion, we also have what you call the file conversion. So the files format of the older system will be different from the newer system. So there is a need to convert that old format into a newer file format. Now we're transferring the data from the older format files to the new files of this particular system. The other ones will be maybe user training. Training also takes place during the system implementation. And last one, we have what we call the system documentation. The system documentation as part of the implementation activity, the system implementation as part of the activity. So your work as an auditor is to verify, did they have adequate documentation? You have to verify. By each stage up, the procedures that auditor can perform is to verify if they had adequate documentation. Another one, did they effectively train the system users? Well, the system users are trained to be able to understand how to use the system. I love the other one, you must verify whether they use the correct strategy during the system conversion. Did they use the correct strategy during the system conversion? If they mention direct, did they follow that direct? I love also, the system is normally implemented within a certain time frame. So your work as an auditor is trying to establish, did they implement the system as per their schedule? Did they implement the system as per the schedule? Then you go to the last stage of a system development, which is number six stage. What is a system review and maintenance? System review and maintenance. System review and maintenance. System review and maintenance. System review and maintenance. So remember that once you have implemented the system, it may not operate to the expected capacity. It may not be operating to the expected capacity. Therefore, there is a need to monitor the progress of that system in terms of how it is operating in achieving the identified activities. For example, our initial intention, we expect the system to operate at 100% capacity. And through our review, through our independent internal review, you find the system still operating below the capacity, but we've got 70% capacity. So there is a need to better it. We are able to correct the system, and make it to be better. So all those activities take place at this particular stage of a system review and maintenance, which is basically to correct some deficiencies in that system to make it it can now work better as per the initial expectation. There are a number of maintenance types of maintenance normally done for this stage the various types of the maintenance. We have what we call the corrective maintenance. Corrective maintenance. We have the corrective maintenance. Corrective maintenance is that we have identified an anomaly in the system. There is some parts which is not working well. It is a defective. They are identified and are corrected. Such kind of maintenance, not a corrective maintenance. We also have what we call the adaptive maintenance. adaptive maintenance, adaptive maintenance. So we want to make the system to be adaptable. It could get used into that environment. Like in the case of a token, when it was introduced, some people were so much used to maybe the queuing, just to go there and queue and wait to be assigned. So you make people now to get used into that a new system. Such kind of maintenance in any adapt to just make the system that is able now to be able to adjust to the new work environment. Then you have what you call the perfective maintenance. Perfective maintenance. So perfective maintenance now to make the system better, to make it better. If it was operating at 70%, we can now ensure it can be able to work at 100%. The last one is what we call the replacive maintenance. Replacive. So replacive can take us back to this stage of a system problem definition, the stage number one, because we have found that this system is not meeting our objectives. So there is a need for us to replace it, replace the entire component, or to replace a bit of that particular component. So these are the activities that take place at the system maintenance stage. So you work as an auditor, you must do a confirmation where there are adequate maintenance procedures put in place by the client. Okay, yes, Stephen ameuliza a very nice question that when Safaricom tells you that they are under maintenance, what really happens? So for maybe security reasons, that could be a security reasons to them, is an area that us may not know what is actually really happening. That maintenance can be taken as part of security reasons, their own information security reasons, which they may not share with the public, with the public. But with your maintenance is one of the recommended procedures just to ensure the system becomes what? Better. The system is better. But we can see when Safaricom say they are undergoing maintenance, it simply means that there are some weaknesses in that system which needs to be improved, So that time they're now engaging their system development team or their IT professionals to work on the system to just improve it so that it can work to that expected capacity. Now system peers are overwhelmed. Systems gets overwhelmed. As they get overwhelmed, they can break out. It can crash. So to ensure that system cannot crash, they can take it through the maintenance. They can take it through what you call the maintenance process. Alafu kuna hii part ya what you call the hacking, where people try to gain unauthorized access. Is these are one of the security threat area to information system. Every day Safaricom inasema they receive more than 1,000 hacking threats. 1,000 hacking threats every day. 1,000 hacking threats. So hii ikiwachwa for a longer time without maintenance, then it means that one day, or maybe just on one occasion, somebody can gain a successful entry into their system, access the information they want, or even to steal funds from them, or to steal any data from them. So due to these ones, they have to maintain their system. They have to go through the maintenance of their system. Like hacking, you have a door. Hacking is like you have a door. Hacking is normally like you have a door, because if one wants to gain access to your room, it's only maybe through a door or a window. So what will they do? They come and hit this door. They keep hitting this door severally. They just hit the door severally. If this door has been hit several times, the door becomes very weak. Then one day this person can gain an entry into your room and steal something from it. The same also happens for the ICT system. When the hackers keep on hitting you, they're trying to hit you with their threats. There's one day that there'll be a possible entry. They'll gain that access. So that could be one of the reasons why they go for maintenance. So whenever they told you that they're going for maintenance, there is a reason but the reason is known to them. One, it could be that the system is overwhelmed. It can crash if there is no proper maintenance. The other one is just to ensure they're able to deal with any possibility of the hacking threat threats. But much of the time, like the KPLC, they normally go for a maintenance, just to ensure that their system does not become overwhelmed. So Stephen, that's what they mean. So that will now bring us to the end of that discussion on the system development controls. So we go to the third one, which is organization. No, nataka to summarize some of these things hapa. Unaweza ulizwa what will be some of the auditor procedures in that area of system development controls. So we just summarize some of these procedures. We move on to organizational controls. So what are the audit procedures? Audit procedures. What are the audit procedures with regard to the system development controls? Audit procedures. Audit procedures with regard to the system development controls. So we can just summarize them briefly. One, to determine if the system documentation, is complete and accurate. To determine if the system documentation is a complete and accurate. Number two, to determine if the procedures for testing, were duly followed. To determine if the procedures for testing were duly followed. To determine if the procedures for testing were duly followed. Next, to determine if the staffs, were adequately trained. To determine if the staffs were adequately trained. To determine if the staffs were adequately trained. To determine if the staffs were adequately trained. Next, to determine if the system objectives, and requirements are achieved. To determine if the system objectives and requirements are achieved. The next, to review input and output controls. To review input and output controls. To review input and output controls and verify that the system is processing data accurately. And verify that the system is processing data accurately. And verify that the system is processing data accurately. To verify that the system is processing data accurately. So let's go to the number 3, which was organizational controls. Organizational controls. Organizational controls. Organizational controls. So this is basically on the controls, maybe the staffing, the management aspect of it. So one up is about assigning responsibility. So there must be responsibility assigned to the various information system users. Responsibility assignment. Because once you've been assigned responsibility, it also comes with accountability. So one has to be responsible for their activities. The other one is what we call the segregation of duties. As an example of the organizational control, segregation of duties. Segregation of duties. Segregation of duties. Segregation of duties. The other one is proper effective recruitment. Effective recruitment. Effective recruitment. Effective recruitment policies. Effective recruitment policies. Effective recruitment policies. Another one is user trainer, user training, user training, user training measures, user training measures needs to be put in place, etc. So let's take a 5 minutes break. Then when we come back, we go to the second part, which is application controls now. Application controls.
for lack of a better word, with the governor? What is it? I have no beef with him at all. And I've been very respectful.
I forget this. Yes, so the number 2 application controls. So this relates to specific procedures over the accounting and processing applications that ensures that transactions are properly recorded, accurately processed, and properly authorized. So basically, it applies to those measures put in place with regard to the processing applications of the system, the processing application of the systems. So they include. So where do they apply? 1, 2, input controls, Then number 2, processing controls. Then number 3, output controls. Then number 4, master file and standing data. Controls. Master file and standing data controls. So those are some of the areas which these controls do apply, class. Yes, so the input is basically on when it comes to keying the data into the system. There are some validation and verification measures here. Validation and verification measures. Undertaken. Validation and verification measures are undertaken. For example, you have to, there must be measures that ensure that the data that's being keyed into the system falls into the required parameter, and it is also correct. Like there are a number of checks here which can be performed. There are a number of checks which can be performed here to does that verification and validation checks. 1, we can do what you call the complete check, just to confirm the details before they're keyed into the system are complete in all aspects. They are detailed enough. The other one, we can also do what you call the range check, which confirm the data details to be processed falls within the required range. They falls within the required range. Like if you're processing a payroll data, you can be looking at the salary range, with that data that you want to process. All the range limits are captured. The other one is what you call, you can also have what we call the check digit checks. So check whether the digits in that data that you want to process, for example, come on amount, every amount figures digits there captured is correct. Every amount digits covered there is correct. So these are some of the examples of the checks which can be done on the input of the data. Another measure is to ensure before that data is keyed into the system, there must be proper authorization. The one who is keying the data into the system must have been authorized to do so. Then you have the processing control. So processing control is the data is being processed using a program. So they should be measured to ensure the correct program is used to process any given data. There also be measures put in place to ensure that whoever is doing the program modification or maybe the program alteration is only authorized to do so. Then we have what you call the output control. So these are now protects either the hard copy from the system, or the soft copy. Like one of the measures that can be put in place with regard to the input controls is that there must be recording of every output. there must be recording of every output that comes out of the system. There should be recording of every output that comes out of the system. The other one, there must be proper custody. Having proper custody of that output in the hands of a responsible official. Proper custody of that output in the hands of a responsible officials. Like we can have a computer librarian who was given that responsibility to take care of any media that comes out of the system. And also there must be a need to check whether the output matches with the expectation. That output, is it reasonable? Does it also matches with what expectation? Was it the output that was desired to come out as a result of the processing operations? Then next we have the controls and master file. Master file is that file that contains data to be used for a longer time, contains a permanent records for the company. Normally, the environment of transaction processing, we have two files, the transaction file, the transaction file, the transaction file. So transaction file normally captures the incoming and the outgoing data. The incoming and the outgoing data is captured by the transaction file. So in that case, it stores a temporary data for the organization, stores just a temporary data for the organization. It is that data from the transaction file that shall be used to update the master file, which has the standing data. Standing data here, it implies kwamba it is a data to be used repeatedly or recurrently over a longer period of over a time. So there must be control measures to protect the master file. One, on the modification or the alteration. Any modification or the alteration, the master file, it must be authorized. Any person who wants to do modification or the alteration, the master file must have been given permission to do so. So class, those are what we're referring to as the application controls and the various areas where they are applicable, So that will now bring us to an end on the various IT controls, the general controls, and now the application controls. So I want us now to move on to what we call the computer-assisted audit techniques. The computer-assisted audit techniques. The computer-assisted audit techniques, the CATs. So the computer-assisted audit techniques, the CATs. So CATs is just a program which is used by the auditor to audit in a computerized environment, to be able to audit in a computerized environment. The computer-assisted auditor technique, the CATs, the computer-assisted auditor technique, which is a program which enables the auditor to perform auditing work in the computerized environment. So yesterday, I mentioned something with regard to the software, and I said Comba software can be of two. We can have a general purpose software that performs any general data processing activities, and we can also have what we call a specific or a specialized software that only performs a specific task, So this software is CATS can be general or it can be specific. If it is a specific, or these ones are being general, they are normally provided by the vendors, the various vendors, the software developers. And this one you can just walk to a shop, you buy it, come install into your system for your own use. Then you have this specific. So specific can be developed through two approaches. One, it can be in-house, like a very big auditing firm, that has capability to employ more staff. They can also have their IT staffs who are employed on a permanent basis. So in that case, the IT staff will be responsible to develop CATs for them or to develop a computer programs for them. The other one, you can go for what you call contracting. Contracting now engage a third party to develop that program for you. You engage a third party to develop that program for you. So most small firms will go for contracting. For the bigger firms, because they do have got adequate manpower resources, they can go for the in-house development. There are types of cuts. There are types of cuts which you need to know. The types of cuts, very important area that you need to know, the various types of cuts. There are only three main types of cuts. There are only three main types of cuts which are applicable in the environment of auditing computerized systems. One, there is what you call the audit software. Auditor software. We have auditor software. So audit software is a program used by the auditor. This is a program. This is a program. This is a program. This is a program used by the auditor. Used by the auditor. Used by the auditor. Used by the auditor to interrogate. To interrogate. To interrogate. Interrogate. Interrogate the client system, the client system, to interrogate the client system and perform a number of audit procedures, a number of auditor procedures, a number of auditor procedures, a number of auditor procedures. E.g., so which are some of the functions that can be performed by the audit software? Number one is a sample selection for testing, sample selection for testing, sample selection for testing, sample selection for testing. Another one is to perform arithmetical operations, perform arithmetical operations. Another one is to perform substantive testing, testing, to perform substantive testing on classes of transactions, on classes of transactions, on classes of transactions and balances, on class of transactions and balances. Another one to perform analytical review procedures, to perform analytical review procedures, analytical review procedures, to perform analytical review procedures, etc. Then number two type of the cuts, we have what we call the test data. Number two, we have the test data. The test data. So number two of the cuts, which can be used by the auditors, we have the test data. So whenever we mention a test data, what we need to know is that we have data in the system. We have data and system. We have data and system. We have data and our system. So you can ask yourself, whose data is being tested, whose data is used for testing, and whose system is being tested. So whose data is being tested and whose system is being tested. Sorry, whose data is used to test a system and whose system is being tested. So the answer is that we are testing the auditor's data. We are testing the auditor's data in the client system. So never use the test data. You basically test the auditor's dummy data. The dummy data, testing the auditor's dummy data. Test the auditor's dummy data on the client system. Testing the auditor's dummy data on the client system. So whenever auditors are using the test data of the cuts, they are testing the auditor's data, the auditor's dummy data into the client system, The reason for doing that one is to confirm, does the controls do exist in the client system? Does the controls do exist in the client system? And are the controls effective to detect any material misstatements? Are the controls effective to detect any material misstatements? So the test data is used to confirm if the controls do exist and are the controls effective to detect any material misstatements. So sasa, that is it on test data. Is the auditor's data being tested on the client system to determine whether the controls do exist and the controls effective to detect material misstatement. Are the controls effective to detect a material misstatement? So then we go to the third type of softwares, the cuts. Number 3, we have what you call others. Number 3, others. So others. So others, we have got at least 2 of them. On the other softwares, we have got at least 2 of them, which you need to know. Number 1, we have what you call the embedded audit software. Embedded audit software. Embedded audit software. Auditor software. Or embedded audit software. The number 2, we have the integrated audit. Integrated audit test facilities. Integrated test facilities. The embedded audit software, alafu na integrated audit test facilities. So you embedded app is just kind of a program that will be incorporated into the client system. Inakuwa incorporated into the client system for the purposes of monitoring. Monitor the program changes, monitor the program changes, any possible program changes, and also to carry out the test of control that may be very useful to the auditor. So its work is to to monitor any program changes and to perform any test of what? Controls, any test of controls that will be very important to the auditor. At this point, you should be very conversant with what is meant by the term test of control. Test of the control, the other term for it is a compliance what? Testing, performing compliance testing. And that basically means to confirm whether the controls do exist and the controls are effective. Then we have the other one, which is the auditor test, the integrated facility. So the same also, this one up, when it comes to performing substantive procedures. So it can be incorporated also in the client system for the purpose of just collecting evidence, collecting some evidence on the transactions being processed by such kind of a system, being processed by such kind of a system. So we will move on to what we call the factors to be considered. When auditors want to use the cuts, there are factors to be considered. Factors to be considered when using cuts. Factors to be considered when to use cuts. When to use cuts. When to use cuts. The number of factors that auditors have to consider when they want to use a cuts. So which are some of the factors auditors need to put into account when using cuts? One is the time constraints. They need to consider time constraint. Do they have time? Do they have time to fully use the cuts? The time constraints. Number two is the availability of the client system, system. Yeah, sometimes the client may not cooperate with the auditor. They may not allow the auditor to have maybe him installing software, installing a software in their system. The other one is the level of the audit risk, level of auditor risk. This also needs to be determined. The level of audit risk is also determined whether the auditor is going to use a cut or not. The other one is the level of training required. Level of training required. Level of training are required. Level of training are required. Level of training are required. The other point is on the computer knowledge, expertise, and experience of the auditor. Computer knowledge, expertise, and experience of the auditor. Computer knowledge, experience, and expertise of the auditor, and expertise of the auditor, and expertise of the auditor, expertise of the auditor. So those are some of the factors that the auditor will consider before using the cuts. Then in class, we have the advantages of using the cuts. What are the benefits of using the cuts to the auditor? What could be the benefits of using the cuts to the auditor? What are some of the benefits of using cuts by the auditor? So is this one, I can leave it, you can read on your own. We have them there on the notes on the advantages of using the cuts and also the disadvantages of using the cuts by the auditor. So hiyo mnaweza soma so that we can now just save our time on that area. We don't spend so much time kuangalia hiyo sasa, what are the advantages and the disadvantages of using the cuts. Tuangalie equation on November 2020, question 3. November 2020, question 3. November 2020, question 3. November 2020, question 3. Question 3C. November 2020, question 3C. Question 3C. Question 3C. So your audit firm is currently engaged in the audit. Your audit firm is currently engaged in the audit of Z Limited for the financial year ending 30th November 2020. You are considering whether to perform certain tests manually or with the computer assisted audit techniques, CATs. So required, discuss 3 factors that could influence your decision on whether to perform the test manually or with the CATs. So discuss 3 factors that could influence your decision on whether to perform the test manually or with the CATs. So which are the factors there? Here they are, the factors that you have to consider as an auditor, whether you're going to perform the test manually or with the CATs. So you have to consider, for example, the time constraints, availability of the client system, level of the audit risk, the level of the training required, then the level of the auditor's knowledge, experience, and expertise. Some of the factors you have to take into account to determine on whether to use the CATs or not. So our last part of this chapter, is going to be what is referred to as the information system security controls. Information system security controls. Information system security controls. That's the last part of this chapter. Information system security controls. Information system security controls. Information system security controls. Information system security controls. So there are ways on how this one can be, information system can be secured. Number one is encryption. Encryption. Data encryption. Number two, use of firewalls. Firewalls. Number three area is use of passwords. Passwords. The next we have antivirus. 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 Those are some of the measures which can be put to safeguard an information system. As I explained earlier, what's an encryption? What's an encryption controls? Ukasema kwamba it's very dangerous to always store data in a plain text. In a plain text, there is a possibility of somebody accessing it for their own malicious use. So before that data is transmitted in any media, it has to be converted into security codes. Ikifika the other end, the other person can encode it so that they read and understand the contents of such information. The other measures, you use of firewalls that already has been explained, passwords, and also the antiviruses, that is now to fight the viruses, the various forms of the viruses which could be affecting a system malfunctions. And that will now bring us to an end of that chapter on the computer auditing in the computerized system, auditing in the computerized system. So our next chapter will be what you call the emerging, what you call the contemporary and emerging issues in audit. Contemporary and emerging issues in audit. That will be our second last topic. Contemporary and emerging issues. Contemporary and emerging issues in audit. Contemporary and emerging issues in audit. This subtopic areas to be covered in this chapter will be what you call e-commerce auditing. Number one will be e-commerce auditing. E-commerce auditing. E-commerce auditing. E-commerce auditing. The second one will be what you call the cloud documentation. Cloud documentation. Cloud documentation. Cloud documentation. Then the third one will be data analytics. Data analytics. Data analytics. And the focus is our tools. Tools in audit. Tools in audit. Tools in audit. Data analytics tools in audit. So these are the main three areas under this chapter on the contemporary and emerging issues. So when we meet that day, it answer now understand the background of an e-commerce transactions, the systems, the various control measures that needs to be put in place to secure the e-commerce platform. Then what are some of the few audit procedures that can be undertaken by the auditor in auditing such kind of system. We understand that nowadays we are in a world whereby much of our transactions